Hola mi gente, MsMalcolmHughes here, back with another book review. And today we are going to be discussing What Would Martin Say by Clarence B. Jones. This book is written from the perspective of, as you can guess, what will Martin Luther King say about a number of topics that are happening in modern day times. So the author, Clarence B. Jones, was Martin Luther King's attorney, as well as one of his confidants and advisors. So here are the topics that are discussed throughout the book. What did Martin say about me, the author? What would Martin say about today's Black leadership? What would Martin say about affirmative action? What would Martin say about illegal immigration? What would Martin say about anti-Semitism? What would Martin say about Islamic terrorism and the war in Iraq? And what would Martin say about who killed him? So the first iteration of this book came out in 2008, 2009. So obviously a little ways back and not based on the most current of events happening today. Now, the first thing I will say about this book is the author says that many people come to him frequently. He works at a Dr. King Center at a university. So I get that. People come to him frequently asking, what would Dr. King say about this? What would Martin say about that? So I'm just start my biggest frustration of the book. I fundamentally disagree with the author speaking for Dr. King. I understand that he was an advisor, he was a confidant, he was there. However, I would like to note that whatever you have to say is only based on the man which you got to know at the time of his murder, right? At the time of his assassination. You cannot be aware of how life would have impacted him, how experiences would have changed him, how his own knowledge and learning would have shifted his ideology in the way in which he views political events himself and the world, right? So that's my number one frustration with this book, just starting off that. Now, of course, who someone is at the core is essentially the same, but your thinking and your political stance and your philosophies can definitely grow over time. What I feel about this book is that the author had opinions, which is fine, right? And that's what most of the book is. Most of the book is the author addressing these topics, giving background knowledge, giving his opinion based on research or just his own experience, and then adding the caveat of, here's my experience with Dr. King, here's what Dr. King said about this circumstance or this situation, here's how I think it would apply to this topic, and this is what I think Dr. King would say. I think the title of this book should be What Dr. King Might Say, What Martin Might Say, because honestly you don't know, right? So I just want to add that caveat, add that that's my number one frustration with this book. Now, moving beyond that, the book isn't horrible. The author is a good writer. I wasn't really bored for the most part, just frustrated with what I said already. Some positive aspects of the book, I definitely feel like I'm getting old school civil rights tea. Just a lot of knowledge from the story of how Dr. King actually went and really tried to sway him to join the movement, because the author had his whole life, he had a wife out in California, he was a successful attorney, he had no desire to join the civil rights movement. That is an interesting story in and of itself, because he was married to a white woman, and that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is that he was married to a white woman and he didn't want to join the civil rights movement. He had no desire to give up his life and really go, and his wife was kind of the one to be like, what? And kind of looking at him like, maybe I've married the wrong man, like why would you say no? So I think that was an interesting caveat. That's the first chapter, so to start that off. It was also really show how persistent Dr. King is. He wasn't really willing to take no. I don't want to say the word manipulative, but I definitely think he was strategic in ensuring that he was able to get who he needed in order to be able to make the necessary change. So I definitely think that was an interesting caveat, just an interesting story. And I think sometimes we forget that these individuals who have been deified are human. They were humans. You had human experiences, right? Or they had human experiences. And I think this book helps to bring that home in a sense of like, here was this man who, yes, did miraculous and amazing things, but he was a man with opinions and real life experiences, and also had to be politically savvy and strategize a lot in order to get the things that he wanted done, in addition to being a great orator. I think another topic that the author really tries to discuss is the fact that the movement was a lot more integrated than folks would like to acknowledge. The civil rights movement not all movements during that time, but the civil rights movement, it was a very integrated movement. It had supporters who were not just black, it had supporters from all ethnicities and backgrounds. Also, a lot of the funding came from white people, a lot of funding came from Jewish individuals, and the author really talks about that as well, about anti-Semitism and what he feels is the clash between black people and Jewish people. And he really talks about that, how Jewish people were at that time some of the biggest supporters of the civil rights movement, and he understands where this rhetoric came from, but he really tries to combat it, which I had no problem with, right? I did feel like I was learning a lot, getting a lot of inside information that I really just didn't know. So I think that was a really cool piece about the book. Another piece about this book is where is really when I feel like the author was injecting a lot of his opinions. And I don't necessarily disagree with them. It just seems like he was very frustrated, especially when discussing black leadership. Now, mind you, like I said, this was around 12 years ago. A lot has changed since then. Black Lives Matter was not a movement at the time. So at that time, he was really talking about Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, and a lot of the frustrations that he has with them. And what becomes tricky about the book, or what becomes hard to differentiate in the book sometimes, is who he's upset with, right? He seems to have a lot of frustration. I don't know if anger and resentment are the words, but definitely a lot of frustration and disappointment in a lot of individuals, not just the ones I've named, just how things transpire. He talks about the Freedom of Information Act and just how so much knowledge came out way down the line, and just how things have shifted and changed. And I think all of that is valid, right? I'm not here to dispute his truth by any means. But I think one thing that really stuck out to me during that time, and it's something that intrigues me all the time, is the belief that some people have that the oppressor will actively work to dismantle the system that they've created to oppress them, right? That faith. And my name is obviously MsMalcolmHughes and not Miss Martin Hughes, right? So my name comes from it was actually given to me, but it is the merger of Malcolm X and Langston Hughes, right? MsMalcolmHughes. So growing up, I read a lot of black history, and me personally, I always felt more drawn to the ideology of Malcolm X. And because I'm not a passive person, so for me, I definitely respect Dr. King and the achievements that were made and the successes, absolutely 100%. But that belief, I think, is dangerous, right? And not to say that like some people don't have their heart in the right place, and some people aren't actually genuinely trying to help. By no means am I saying that or discrediting that or disputing that in any way. But I think one thing that really came out with the Freedom of Information Act, and that really hurt the author deeply, was the fact that the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover, and don't get me started on COINTELPRO. Anyone who knows me knows that's a soapbox topic for me. The counterintelligence program that the FBI had, specifically under J. Edgar Hoover, to dismantle what they perceived as the greatest threat to America, which is black nationalism, right? Or the rise of black leaders, or a Jesus as they would term it. So when he talks about how surprised he was with the Freedom of Information Act, to really learn, he knew that their phones were being tapped, right? But to really learn how invasive it was, to really learn that there were spies, black and white, within a movement, right? To really learn that they knew it was like they knew that a hit was going to be out for Dr. King, how they rejected the request to guard him and to provide additional security for him, and all of these things, right? He seemed genuinely surprised by that, and that genuinely surprised me. But it always surprises me. It always surprises me because I don't have that type of faith or trust, right? That people will work against what is innately in their interest, what has been designed in their interest. I think that some people will, for sure, but so for me, I'm rarely talking about an individual, right? I'm often talking about institutions and systems of oppression that have been built and created and sustained over generations. And that's an example of that. So I was really surprised by that. a positive aspect of the book, I really like the historical aspects. I really like that information. I like the background on Dr. King. I like learning more information about his father and his grandfather and the role that they played in, not necessarily the civil rights, well, in the civil rights movement, but also prior to the civil rights movement, and how they were active in their community and their churches and pushing for change and fighting for it in ways prior to what we know as the civil rights movement, because obviously this work didn't start then, it goes way back. Since the first humans were captured and enslaved, people have resisted. So I really liked learning more about that and getting new information that I didn't necessarily know about Dr. King, and getting aspects of his personality that I wasn't aware of. But there were just, yeah, some parts I disagree with. I don't want you to tell me what Dr. King would have said. I want to either read his work and come to that determination for myself, or I want you to tell me what you think Dr. King may have said about this situation. But some things I don't know if we needed this. I don't know if I need you to tell me what Dr. King would say to his murderer. Right? Maybe someone needed it, someone requested it, I don't know who. But I just didn't feel like it was necessary or warranted. I didn't like it. I didn't like the book, honestly. I feel like it was opinion based, and I feel like it should have just been an author giving their opinion on a number of topics. That's honestly how I feel about the book. So I had to give this book a grade on a scale of A to F, because the question is, did the book do what it set out to do? For me, the answer is no. It wasn't poorly written, it wasn't poorly structured, not my favorite style of writing, but it was fine. It was fine. So a C, a D. C or D. That's my review of the book. That's what I have. So as you know, January 15th is Dr. King's birthday. The federal holiday this year will be honored on January 18th. And I just wanted to read this book in order to acknowledge him and the work he's done for the advancement of not just Black people, but all people, right? So I wanted to do that with What Would Martin Say? And unfortunately, I didn't walk away feeling like I had a greater understanding of that. But yeah, that's it for me. More book reviews will be coming. There are 3 more book reviews I have for this month. The book giveaway is still happening. You can enter throughout the entire month of January. So that video will be up here. As always, I am MsMalcolmHughes, one who believes books are sometimes better than people. And until next time, stay safe and be kind to each other. Also, for those of you inquiring, I do still have buttons, my MsMalcolmHughes pins, and the details on how to get those are below.